Guys, welcome back. Please remember I'm sharing this with permission from Scholastic. We're going to start off with our riddle of the day. The riddle of the day from yesterday was, what tastes better than it smells? The answer is a tongue. Your riddle of the day for today is, what has a bottom at the top? I'll leave that there for you to think. Today we're going to be reading chapters 27 and 28. Chapter 27 is called Heartthrob. Around the fire at dinner that night, Tally told the story of how she'd hidden in the river when the Ranger's helicopter first appeared. She had everyone wide-eyed again. Apparently, she'd had one of the more exciting journeys to the smoke. Can you imagine? I'm naked and crouching down in the water, and this rusty machine is destroying my camp. Why didn't they land? Asterix asked. Didn't they see your stuff? I thought they did. The Rangers only pick up uglies in the white flowers, David explained. It's the rendezvous spot we tell runaways to use. They can't just pick up anyone, or they might accidentally bring a spy here. I guess you wouldn't want that, Tally said softly. Still, they should be more careful with those helicopters, Shay said. Someone's going to get chopped up to pieces one day. Tell me about it. The wind almost took my hoverboard away, Tally said. It lifted my sleeping bag right off the ground and went up into the blades. It was totally shredded. She was pleased by the amazement on the faces of her audience. So where did you sleep? Croy asked. It wasn't that bad. It was only for... Tally stopped herself just in time. She'd spent one night without the sleeping bag, but in her story she had spent 4 days in the orchids. It was warm enough. You'd better get a new one before bedtime, David said. It's a lot colder up here than it is down in the weeds. I'll take her to the trading post, Shay said. It's like a requisition center, Tally, only when you get something, you have to leave something else behind as payment. Tally shifted uncomfortably in her seat. She still hadn't gotten used to the idea that she had to pay for things here. All I've got is spag bowl. Shay smiled. That's perfect to trade with. We can't make dehydrated food here, except fruit, and traveling with regular food is a total pain. Spag bowls, good as gold. After dinner, Shay took her to a large hut near the center of town. The shelves were full of things made in the smoke, along with a few objects that had come from the cities. The city-made stuff was mostly shabby and worn, prepared again and again, but the handmade things fascinated Tally. She ran her still raw fingers across the clay pots and wooden tools, amazed at how each had its own texture and weight. Everything seemed so heavy and serious. An older Ugly was running the place, but he wasn't as scary as the boss. He brought out woolen gear and a few silvery sleeping bags. The blankets and scarves and gloves were beautiful, in subdued colors and simple patterns, but Shay insisted that Tally get a city-made sleeping bag. Much lighter, and it squishes up small, much better for when we go exploring. Of course, Tally said, trying to smile. That'll be great. She wound up trading 12 packets of spag bowl for another sleeping bag, and 6 for a handmade sweater, which left her with 8. She couldn't believe that the sweater, browned with bands of pale green and red highlights, cost half as much as the sleeping bag, which was threadbare and patched. You're just lucky you didn't lose your water purifier, Shay said as they walked home. Those things are impossible to trade for. Tally's eyes widened. What happens if they break? Well, they say you can drink water from the streams without purifying it. You're kidding. Nope, a lot of older Smokies do, Shay said. Even if they've got a purifier, they don't bother. Yuck. Shay giggled. Yeah, no kidding. But hey, you can always use mine. Tally put a hand on Shay's shoulder. Same goes for mine. Shay's pace slowed. Tally? Yeah? You were going to say something to me, back in the library, before the boss started yelling at you. Tally's stomach sank. She pulled away, her fingers automatically going to the pendant at her neck. Yeah, Shay said, about that necklace. Tally nodded, but she didn't know how to start. She still hadn't activated the pendant, and since her conversation with David, she wasn't sure she could. Maybe if she returned to the city in a month, starving and empty-handed, Dr. Cable would take mercy on her. But what if the woman kept her promise, and Tally never got the operation? In 20-something years, she would be lined and wrinkled and ugly as the boss, an outcast. And if she stayed here in the smoke, she'd be sleeping in an old sleeping bag and dreading the day her water purifier finally broke down. She was so tired of lying to everyone. I haven't told you everything, she started. I know, but I think I've got it figured out. Tally looks at her friend, afraid to speak. I mean, it's pretty obvious, right? You're all upset because you broke your promise to me. You didn't keep the smoke a secret. Tally's mouth fell open. Shay smiled, taking her hand. As you got closer to your birthday, you decided you wanted to run away, but in the meantime, you met someone important, the same someone who gave you that heart necklace. So you broke your promise to me. You told that someone where you were going. Um, kind of, Tally managed. Shay giggled. I knew it. That's why you've been all nervous. You want to be here, but you also wish you were somewhere else, with someone else. And before you ran away, you left directions, a copy of my note, in case your new heartthrob wanted to join us. Am I right or am I right? Tally bit her lip. Shay's face glowed in the moonlight, obviously thrilled with herself for figuring out Tally's big secret. You're partly right. Oh, Tally, Shay grabbed both her shoulders. Don't you see that it's okay? I mean, I did the same thing. Tally frowned. What do you mean? I wasn't supposed to tell anyone I was coming here. David made me promise I wouldn't even tell you. Why? Shay nodded. He hadn't met you and wasn't sure if he could trust you. Normally, runaways only recruit old friends, people they've tricked with for years. But I'd only known you since the beginning of summer, and I never once mentioned the smoke to you until the day before I left. I was never brave enough, in case you said no. So you weren't supposed to tell me? No way. So when you actually showed up, it made everyone nervous. They don't know whether they can trust you. Even David's been acting weird around me. Shay, I'm so sorry. It's not your fault. Shay shook her head vigorously. It's mine. I screwed everything up. But so what? Once they get to know you, they'll think you're really cool. Yeah, Tally said softly. Everyone's been really nice. She wished she had activated the pendant the moment she'd gotten here. In one day, she'd begun to realize that it wasn't just Shay's dream she'd be betraying. Hundreds of people had made a life in the smoke. I'm sure that your someone will be cool too, Shay said. I can't wait till we're all together. I don't know if that's going to happen. There had to be some way out of this situation. Maybe if she went to another city, or found the Rangers again and told them she wanted to volunteer, they'd make her pretty. But she hardly knew anything about their city except that she didn't know anyone there. Shay shrugged. Maybe not, but I wasn't sure you'd come either. She squeezed Tally's hand. I'm really glad you did, though. Tally tried to smile. Even though I got you into trouble? It's not such a big deal. I think everyone's way too paranoid around here. They spend all this time disguising the place so satellites can't see it. And they mask the hand phone transmissions so they won't be intercepted. And all the secrecy about runaways is way overdone. And dangerous. Just think, if you hadn't been smart enough to figure out my directions, you could be halfway to Alaska by now. I don't know, Shay. Maybe they know what they're doing. The city authorities can be pretty tough. Shay laughed. Don't tell me you believe in special circumstances. I, Callie closed her eyes. I just think that the Smokies have to be careful. Okay, sure. I'm not saying we should advertise, but if people like you and me want to come out here and live differently, why shouldn't we? I mean, no one has the right to tell us we have to be pretty, right? Maybe they're just worried because we're kids, you know? That's the problem with the cities, Tally. Everyone's a kid, pampered and dependent and pretty. Just like they say in school, big-eyed means vulnerable. Well, like you once told me, you have to grow up sometime. Tally nodded. I know what you mean, how the uglies here are more grown up. You can see it in their faces. Shay pulled Tally to a stop and looked at her closely for a second. You feel guilty, don't you? Tally looked back into Shay's eyes, speechless for a moment. She felt suddenly naked as in the cold night air, as if Shay could see straight through her lies. What? She managed. Guilty. Not just that you told your someone about the smoke, but that they might actually come. Now that you've seen the smoke, you're not sure if it was such a good idea. Shay sighed. I know it seems weird at first, and it's a lot of hard work, but I think you'll eventually like it. Tally looked down, feeling tears welling into her eyes. It's not that. Well, maybe it is. I just don't know if I can. Her throat felt too full to speak. If she said another word, she'd have to tell Shay the truth, that she was a spy, a traitor sent here to destroy everything around them, and that Shay was the fool who had led her there. Hey, it's okay. Shay gathered Tally in her arms, rocking her gently as Tally began to cry. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to unload everything on you at once, but I've kind of felt distant from you ever since you got here. It feels like you're not sure you want to look at me. I should tell you everything. Shh. Tally felt Shay's fingers stroking her hair. I'm just glad you're here. Tally felt herself cry, burying her face in the scratchy wool sleeve of her new sweater, feeling Shay's warmth against her, feeling awful about every gesture of kindness from her friend. With half her mind, Tally was actually glad she'd come and seen all this. She could have lived her whole life in the city and never seen this much of the world. With the other half, Tally still wished she had activated the pendant the moment she'd arrived in the smoke, so it would be so much easier that way. But there was no way back in time now. She had to decide whether to betray the smoke or not, completely understanding what it would do to Shay, David, to everyone here. It's okay, Tally, Shay murmured. You'll be okay. Our next chapter is called Suspicion. It's chapter 28. As the days passed, Tally fell into the routines of the smoke. There was something comforting about the exhaustion of hard work. All her life, Tally had been troubled by insomnia, lying awake most nights thinking about arguments she'd had, or wanted to have, or things she should have done differently. But here in the smoke, her mind shut off the moment her head hit the pillow, which wasn't even a pillow, just her new sweater stuffed into a cotton bag. Tally still didn't know how long she was going to stay there. She hadn't come to a decision about whether to activate the pendant, but she knew that thinking about it all the time would drive her crazy. So she decided to put it out of her mind. One day she might wake up and realize that she couldn't stand to live her entire life as an ugly, no matter who it hurt or what it cost. But for the moment, Dr. Cable could wait. Forgetting her troubles was easy in the smoke. Life was so much more intense than in the city. She bathed in a river so cold that she had to jump in screaming. And she ate food pulled away from a fire hot enough to burn her tongue, which city food never did. Of course, she missed shampoo that didn't sting her eyes, and flushed toilets. She had learned to her horror what latrines were, and mostly med spray. But however blistered her hands became, Tally felt stronger than ever before. She could work all day at the railroad site, then race David and Shay home on hoverboards, her backpack full of more scrap metal than she could have lifted a month before. She'd learned from David how to repair her clothes with a needle and thread, how to tell the raptors from their prey, and even how to clean fish, which turned out to be not nearly as bad as cutting them up in bioclass. The physical beauty of the smoke had also cleared her mind of worries. Every day seemed to change the mountains, the sky, and the surrounding valleys, making them spectacular in a completely new way. Nature, at least, didn't need an operation to be beautiful. It just was. One morning on the way to the railroad track, David pulled his board alongside Tally's. He rode silently for a while, taking the familiar turns with his usual grace. Over the last 2 weeks, she'd learned that his jacket was actually made of leather, real dead animals. But she'd gradually gotten used to the idea. The Smokies hunted, but they were like the Rangers, killing only species that didn't belong in this part of the world, or that had gotten out of control thanks to the Rusty's meddling. With its random patches, the jacket would probably look silly on anyone else, but it suited David, somehow, as if growing up here in the wild allowed him to fuse with the animals that had donated their skins to his clothes. And it probably didn't hurt that he had actually made the jacket himself. He spoke up suddenly. I've got a present for you. A present? Really? By now, Tally understood that nothing in the smoke ever lost its value. Nothing was discarded or given away just because it was old or broken. Everything was repaired, refitted, and recycled. And if one Smoky couldn't put it to use, it was traded to another. Few things were given away lightly. Yeah, really. David angled closer and handed her a small bundle. She unwrapped it, following the familiar route down the stream almost without looking. It was a pair of gloves, handmade in light brown leather. She shoved the bright city-made wrapping paper into her pocket and pulled the gloves onto her blistered hands. Thanks, they fit perfectly. He nodded. I made them when I was about your age. They're a little small for me these days. Tally smiled, wishing she could hug him. When they spread their arms to take a hard turn, she held his hand for a second. Flexing her fingers, Tally found the gloves were soft and pliant. The palms weren't pale from years of use. White lines from the finger joints revealed how they had fitted David's hands. They're wonderful. Come on, David said. It's not like they're magic or anything. No, but they've got something. History, Tally realized. In the city, she'd owned lots of things. Practically anything she wanted came out of the wall. But city things were disposable and replaceable, as interchangeable as the t-shirts, jackets, and skirt combinations of dorm uniforms. Here in the smoke, objects grew old, carrying their histories with them in dings and scratches and tatters. David chuckled up at her and sped up, joining Shay at the front of the pack. When they got to the railroad site, David announced that they had to clear more track, using vibrosaws to cut through the vegetation that had grown up around the metal rails. What about the trees? Corey asked. What about them? Do we have to chop them down? Tally asked. David shrugged. Shrub trees like this aren't good for much, but we won't waste them. We'll take them back to the smoke for burning. Burning, Tally said. The Smokies usually only cut down trees from the valley, not the rest of the mountain. These trees had been growing for decades, and David wanted to use them just to cook a meal? She looked at Shay for support, but her friend's expression was carefully neutral. She probably agreed, but didn't want to argue with David in front of everyone about how to run his project. Yes, burning, he said. And after we salvage the track, we'll replant. We'll put a row of useful trees where the railroad used to be. The 5 others looked at him silently. He spun a saw in his hand, anxious to get started, but aware that he didn't have their full support yet. You know, David, Croy said, these trees aren't useless. They protect the underbrush from sunlight that keeps the soil from eroding. Okay, you win. Instead of planting some other kind of tree, we'll let the forest take back the land. All the crappy scrubs and underbrush you want. But do we have to clear cut them? Asterix asked. David took a slow breath. Clear cutting was the word for what the Rusties had done in the old forests, felling every kind of tree, killing every living thing, turning entire countries into grazing land. Whole rainforests had been consumed, reduced from millions of interlocking species to a bunch of cows eating grass and a vast web of life traded for cheap hamburgers. Look, we're not clear cutting. All we're doing is pulling out the garbage that the Rusties left behind, David said. It just takes a little surgery to do it. We could chop around the trees, Tally said, only cut into them where we need to. Like you said, surgery. Okay, fine, he chuckled. Let's just see what you think of the trees after you've had to hack a few of them out of the ground. He was right. The vibrosaw purred through heavy vines, parted tangled underbrush like a comb through wet hair, and sliced cleanly through metal when the odd misstroke brought the cutting edge down onto the track. But when its teeth met the gnarled roots and twisted branches of the scrub trees, it was a different story. Tally grimaced as her saw bounced across the hard wood again, spitting bits of bark at her face, its low hum transformed into a protesting howl. She struggled to force the edge down into the tough old branch. One more cut and this section of track would be clear. Going good? You've almost got it, Tally. She noticed that Croy stood well back, poised to jump in if the saw somehow slipped from her hands. She could see now why David had wanted to chop the scrub trees into pieces. It would have been a lot easier than reaching through the tangle of roots and branches, trying to bring the vibrosaw to bear against a precise spot. Stupid trees, Tally muttered, gritting her teeth as she plunged the blade down again. Finally the saw found purchase in the wood, letting out a high-pitched scream as it bit into the branch. Then it slipped through, free for a second, before it thrust, spitting and screeching, into the dirt below. Yeah, Tally said, lifting her goggles, the saw powering down in her hands. Croy stepped forward and kicked the section of branch away from the track. Perfect surgical slice, Doctor, he said. I think I'm getting the hang of this, Tally said, wiping her brow. It was almost noon, and the sun was beating down the clearing mercilessly. She pulled off her sweater, realizing that the morning chill was long gone. You were right about the trees giving shade. You said it, Croy said. Nice sweater, by the way. She smiled. Along with her new gloves, it was her prized possession. Thanks. What did it cost you? 6 bagfuls. A little pricey. Pretty, though. Croy caught her eye. Tally, remember that first day you got here when I kind of grabbed your knapsack? I really wouldn't have taken your stuff, not without giving you something for it. You just surprised me when you said I could have everything. Sure, no problem, she said. Now that she worked with Croy, he seemed like a nice enough guy. She'd rather have been teamed up with David or Shay, but those two were cutting together today, and it was probably time that she got to know some of the other Smokies better. And you got a new sleeping bag too, I hope? Yeah, 12 spag bowls. Must be almost out of trade. She nodded. Only 8 left. Not bad. Still, I bet you didn't realize on your way here that you were eating your future wealth. Tally laughed. They crouched under the partly cut tree, pulling handfuls of cut vines from around the track. If I had known how valuable food packets were, I probably wouldn't have eaten so many, starving or not. I don't even like it anymore. The worst was spag bowl for breakfast. Sounds good to me, Croy chuckled. This section look clear to you? Sure, let's start on the next one. She handed him the saw. Croy did the easy part first, attacking the underbrush with the humming saw. So, Tally, there's one thing that's kind of confusing. What's that? The saw glanced off metal, sending up a smattering of sparks. The first day you were here, you said you left the city with 2 weeks of food. Yeah? If it took you 9 days to get here, you should only have had 5 days of food left, maybe 15 packets altogether. But I remembered on that first day when I looked into your bag, and I was like, she's got tons. Callie swallowed, trying not to show any expression. And it turns out I was right. 12 plus 6 plus 8 is 26? Yeah, I guess. He nodded, working the saw carefully beneath the low branch. I thought so. But you left the city before your birthday, right? Callie thought fast. Sure, but I guess I didn't really eat 3 meals every day, Croy. Like I said, I was pretty sick of spag bowl after a while. Seems like you didn't eat much at all for such a long trip. Callie struggled to do the math in her head to figure out what sort of numbers would add up. She remembered what Shay had said the first night. Some Smokies were suspicious of her, worried that she might be a spy. Callie thought they had all accepted her by now. Apparently not. She took a deep breath, trying to keep the fear out of her voice. Look, Croy, let me tell you something. A secret. What's that? I probably left the city with more than just 2 weeks worth of food. I never really counted. But you kept saying, yeah, I might have exaggerated a little, just to make the trip sound more interesting, you know? Like I could have run out of food when the Rangers didn't turn up. But you're right, I always had plenty. Sure, he looked up at her, smiling gently. I thought maybe so. Your trip did sound a little too interesting to be true. But most of what I said was, of course. The saw whined to a stop in his hand. I'm sure most of it was. The question is, how much? Callie met his piercing eyes, struggling to think of what to say. It was nothing but a few extra food packets, hardly proof that she was a spy. She should just laugh it off. But the fact was that he was dead right, and that silenced her. You want to saw for a while? He said mildly, clearing this up as hard work. Since they were clearing brush, there was no load of metal to take back at midday, so the railroad crew had brought their lunches out with them. Potato soup and bread with salty olives dotted through it. Callie was glad when Shay took her lunch away from the rest of the group to the edge of the dense forest. She followed and settled next to her friend in the dappled light. I need to talk to you, Shay. Shay, not looking at her, sighed softly as she tore her bread into pieces. Yeah, I guess you do. Oh, did he talk to you too? Shay shook her head. He didn't have to say anything. Callie frowned. What do you mean? I mean, it's obvious. Ever since you got here. I should have seen it right away. I never. Callie started, but her voice betrayed her. What are you saying? You think Troy's right? Shay sighed. I'm just saying that. She stopped and turned to face Callie. Croy? What about Croy? He was talking to me before lunch, and he noticed my sweater and asked if I got a sleeping bag, and he figured out that after 9 days of getting here, I had too much spag bowl left. You had too much what? Shay's expression was one of total confusion. What on earth are you talking about? Remember when I got here, I told everyone that. Callie trailed off for the first time, noticing Shay's eyes. They were lined with red, as if she hadn't slept. Wait a second. What did you think I was talking about? Callie held out a hand, fingers splayed. This. What? Hold out yours. Callie opened one hand, making a mirror image of Shay's. Same size, Shay said. She turned both palms up. Same blisters, too. Callie looked down and blinked. If anything, Shay's hands were in worse shape, red and dry and cracked with ragged edges of burst blisters. Shay always worked so hard, diving in first, taking the hardest jobs. Callie's fingers went to the gloves tucked into her belt. Shay, I'm sure David didn't mean to. I'm sure he did. People always think long and hard about gifts in the smoke. Callie bit her lip. It was true. She pulled the gloves from her belt. You should take them. I don't want them. Callie sat back, stunned. First crow, now this? No, I guess you don't. She dropped the gloves. But Shay, shouldn't you talk to David before you go nuts about this? Shay chewed at a fingernail, shaking her head. He doesn't talk to me that much anymore. Not since you showed up. Not about anything important. He's got stuff on his mind, he says. Oh. Callie gritted her teeth. I like David, but it's not your fault, okay? I know that. Shay reached out and gave Callie's heart-shaped pendant a little flick. And besides, maybe your mysterious someone will show up, and it won't matter anyway. Callie nodded. True enough. Once the specials got here, Shay's romantic life would be the least of anyone's worries. Have you even mentioned that to David? It seems like it might be an issue. No, I haven't. Why not? It just never came up. Shay's mouth tightened. That's convenient. Callie let out a groan. But Shay, you said it yourself. I wasn't supposed to be giving out directions to the smoke. I really feel bad about the whole thing. I'm not going to go advertising it, except by wearing that thing around your neck. Which didn't do much good, though, since apparently David didn't notice it. Callie sighed. Or maybe he doesn't care, because this is all just in your... She couldn't finish. It was just in Shay's head. It wasn't just in Shay's head. She could see it now, and feel it too. When David showed her the railway cave, and told her his secret about his parents, he had trusted her, even when he shouldn't have. And now this present, could it really be just Shay overreacting? In a quiet part of her mind, Callie realized that she was hoping it wasn't. She took a deep breath, expelling the thought. Shay, what do you want me to do? Just tell him. Tell him what? Tell him about why you wear that heart, about your mysterious someone. Too late. Callie felt the expression on her face. Shay nodded. You don't want to, do you? That's pretty clear. No, I will, really. Sure you will. Shay turned away, pulling a hunk of bread from her soup and taking a vicious bite. I will. Callie touched her friend's shoulder, and instead of pulling away, Shay turned back to her, her expression almost hopeful. Callie swallowed. I'll tell him everything. I promise. And that's the end of your chapters for today. Tune in tomorrow for your next 2 chapters. Bye!